So we have two people here that I know of who are in school now. Vera, who is doing her work on her LUT, is right behind Roxanne. And Charlotte, who is at Unity Urban Ministerial School right now. So as we go into this new year, we want to hold them in prayer and hold them in love and hold them in peace as they go through this process. I'd love to say it's easy, but it's not. You can go ahead and shake your heads. That's okay. But it's worth every minute of it. I promise you that. So just keep working and keep going, and we'll keep holding you in prayer and bolstering you up as you go through. Oh, great. I was not aware of that, Crystal. Thank you. Excellent. So Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, said, prayer is more than supplication. It's an affirmation of truth, but which has not come into consciousness yet. It comes into consciousness by way of not supplication, but affirmation. In unity, prayer is not about asking and begging and beseeching and trying to get God to do things for us or making deals with God. It's about affirming what we already know to be true, that you are a divine child of God. And you can just put a period there, and we can probably go home now because that's really what we need to learn out of all of this.
You have to pass the basket first.
Oh, yeah, that's right. How could I forget that? So we will do that, I promise you. But just think about that for a minute. You are a divine child of God, just as you are. You are perfect just as you are. I tell you that almost every time I speak, and at some point you're going to believe it. At some point I'm going to believe it, that we are perfect like we are. Does it mean we can't get better? Absolutely not. Of course we're going to get better. But we have to learn and we have to grow and we have to work through our journey and make sure that we go down that path to get to what is better. One of the other things Fillmore said was that there has to be a letting go of old thoughts before new thoughts can find a place in consciousness. So we have to learn to let go and release all of those things that we've held on to that we learned long, long ago about prayer, about all sorts of things. And we have to let them go so that we can move into what is next for us. So I want to ask you a question. Why do you pray? Why do you pray? For peace. Okay, absolutely. Why else do you pray?
Remind myself of who and what God is.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roxanne. All of those are true. And often we pray when we just don't feel well, sick. That's when we feel like we need to pray, or something's going on and we're sad and angry and hurt or lonely, or we've lost someone who's important to us. And at those points, we feel like we need to spend time in prayer. And a lot of us were taught in the olden days, like that part, that we pray by asking God to fix it all. We look at God like he's some great big Santa Claus up in the sky who's going to drop things down for us and do everything that we ask for and that we wish for. But reality is that's not the God that we worship. God is source. God is principle. And God's not going to change no matter who we are and what we're asking about. God is going to be there for us, period. But it's not going to be one of those, God, please fix it for me kind of moments. And we do pray when we need to connect to our inner self, and we need to pray to align with that Christ presence that's within each one of us. And the place that we do that is in our own heart space. We align with God and with ourselves in our inner sanctuary. So in that space where we know God lives in each one of us. God is a part of who we are. Now, I do want to say this before I go too far. However you pray is good. There's not a right and a wrong way. Unity teaches affirmative prayer, but you may pray differently. That is perfectly fine. There's not anything wrong with the way that you pray. You pray the way that you know how to on your journey, and you'll get to other spots along the way where that might change. It might not. And it's okay for you to pray the way that you pray. But affirmative prayer is about transformation in our daily life. Myrtle Fillmore, who's the co-founder of Unity, was actually very sickly. She had tuberculosis, and she started out thinking that she wasn't going to live into old age. She was pretty confident that she was going to be dead before she made it too far into her life. And she was all about being sickly. You know how that works, right? When something's going on in our life, we get all wrapped up in that and we forget anything else, and we hang on to that part of us. That part of us that's sick, that part of us that needs to move on. But we're stuck there for a moment. And we're in that, and that's kind of the way Myrtle was, except she then went to a prayer service where she heard Dr. E.B. Weeks say that she was a child of God and therefore did not inherit sickness. And Myrtle took that to heart, and she took that into herself, and she believed that to be a part of who she was. So she went within herself, looking forward and looking inward to her own healing and aligning herself with the God Spirit that was within her. And as she aligned herself with that, then she could actually be awakened to her own power. That's a fascinating thought to me. Awaken to your power. Awaken to who you are in this earth, who you really are. Carl Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Awaken to who we are. Look inside you and see who you really are. So Myrtle awakened to her power, and she began to speak power and healing to her body. One of the first things it says she did, and I find it fascinating, is that she apologized to her body for all the things she had done to it. So I'm fairly confident that when I start that apology process again, because I've started it many times, that it's going to take me forever. Because you can see I've done some stuff to the body that I probably shouldn't have along the way, and there's other things we won't discuss. You were talking about being a frat boy earlier. So we'll just let that part go, and we'll move on to what's next and just say that there are times when we have done things we probably should not have. But we know that we can look inward and see what it is that we need to do for ourselves now. What is it that we need to do, that we need to take care of in this moment? In Healing Letters, Myrtle said, prayers aren't sent out at all. Sometimes that's our trouble. Where would we send our prayers? We should direct them to our mind, our heart, and our affairs. So not only is she apologizing to her body, but now she's blessing every atom and every cell in her body. And she's doing that within herself, knowing that all the power that she needs is within her. And we can also do that. We affirm our wholeness with divine mind, our wholeness with the divinity with God. And we can start working on our own bodies and working on ourselves and healing ourselves just as Myrtle healed herself. She heard God in one of her times of silence, it says, say that she's to focus not on her faults, but on her virtues. So we quit worrying about the being sick part, and we worry about, or don't worry about, the fact that we are divine. What is it that is about us that we can move forward with and concentrate on? And we concentrate on that oneness that is with God. Such a perfect song to talk about our oneness with God. We are all one, not only with God, but with each other. We're connected to each other. So then she started leading prayer groups, and that's how Unity was founded. As those groups moved out and everything was being brought together and people were coming to learn how she was doing what she was doing. They learned about the way things were going for her. They saw the changes in her life, and they wanted to be a part of that. That's what attracts many of us to Unity. That healing power that we know is there. The fact that we realize that we are a part of the divine. And then when Myrtle was doing all of this, she was still looking within and still working on her own self. Mark 11:24 says, therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. Believe it. That's the hard part for most of us. Believe it. At the point I ask for it, believe it's already mine. It's already done. It's already a part of who I am. And we're called to declare that wholeness and that goodness at that point in our life. We're believing our prayers are answered. The verse suggests that faith perceives that it's already done. And through our faith, we can believe that the prayers are answered before we ever see any proof of that in the real world, in the world that we live in. We're called to declare our wholeness and to work with our inner power. Metaphysically, affirmative prayer is a technique focused on a positive outcome rather than focused on the negative situation. So if you're ill, there was an example in the daily word, but there's a simple one that I use, which is simply, health is my nature. So when I don't feel well, health is my nature. I hang on to that because who I am is whole and healed. Now, I do want to say a couple of things here. I learned when I came to Unity, very different from the church I grew up in, that there's a difference between healing and cured. Took me a long time to really grasp that thought. Healing and cured were not interchangeable words. It's possible to be healed without being cured. It's possible that we can be healed and have that healing realization of our wholeness, of our true spiritual self, a part of us that is accepting and is peaceful and is calm, even when we're still sick, even when there's still that part going on in our outer circumstances that is different than our wholeness. Healing came for me when I realized that even though in my sickness and in my pain, I was foremost a spiritual being. And that spiritual being was what I concentrated on and what I spent my time working on. The cure may come, it may not come. But healing came at the time of my realization of who I am and who I am in God, and that is the divine. Healing is a part of our spiritual growth. Job 22:28 says, "Thou shalt decree a thing, and it shall be established unto you." So whatever we say with our faith, believing, it becomes a part of who we are. So I heard a story from Louise Hay of a person who was in a job that they didn't like. They didn't care for their job at all. In fact, they wanted to get rid of it. But they decided instead to come up with an affirmation, and this is the one they came up with. I deserve the best, and I accept the best now. And it says that this person said that affirmation every day on their way to work. I fear I have some affirmations I say on my way to work that aren't necessarily helpful some days. So I'm trying to reprogram my little brain to say this one along the way. To say this and claim it as a part of who I am. I deserve the best, and I accept the best now. The person got multiple promotions and multiple raises over a short time period. I'm not promising that's going to happen to you. I'm just saying, try it and see what works. See what happens with you when you recognize the divine of who you are, and you can move through that. I do want to share with you one thing that has happened with me. You all have been on this journey with me for 2 years with the stomach cancer fun stuff. And you have been a part of being with me through that process and praying for me through that process. And as of Wednesday, they cannot find any cancer in my body. I'm taking that as a blessing and taking that as a part of my divinity and who I am. I would love to say I myrtled my body just like she did hers, but there were days when it was a lot harder than others. But you work on it and you keep moving forward and you keep going through it and you keep doing it. And that was a part of my learning process. And one of my favorite affirmative prayers is the one that's on the screen. It's the prayer for protection. And a lot of people don't think of that as an affirmative prayer, but I want to tell you a little about it. Because I read an interview with James Dillett Freeman, who wrote the prayer. And I found it just fascinating, the things that he said. And one was that he wrote it during World War II. So this came out in 1940, the first part of the prayer. And when the prayer was first written, it was a little different. It actually said, the light of Christ directs me. The love of Christ enfolds me. The power of Christ protects me. The presence of Christ upholds me. So cute little rhyming words and slightly different, using the word Christ because this was presented at a time of Christmas. So he took that out or he used that in place of God. And then he was asked after that prayer was presented in that conference if he would write a pamphlet. It's called His Protecting Spirit. And you can find a copy of it online, actually, if you look around for it. And it was very interesting to me to look at what it was. And they asked him on the back page of the pamphlet to put affirmative prayers. So he said that he put on there Psalm 23:4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And he said there was a young woman working at Silent Unity with him who was reading his manuscript as he was presenting it. And she read it and she walked up to him and said, now look, Jim, if I were a woman in England and they were dropping bombs on my house, or there was somebody with a loaded gun across from me, the last thing I really want to hear is, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
Yeah.
Can you do better than that? And he said he was shocked. Like, I'm being asked, can I do better than the 23rd Psalm? That's kind of a rough go of it. Most people have a hard time doing things like that. And he said, but in his mind still was that little poem, that poem that he had written for Christmas 2 years earlier. And he could do better, and he wrote the poem out at that point. He took out the rhyming words, he changed it around. He looked at the difference in what was there and what he really wanted to say. He changed from Christ to God, the wording. And then he changed it to the one that we're more familiar with. The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God watches over me. And that's where it ended. And he said a couple of years later, it dawned on him that what he really wanted to do was add that last line that says, wherever I am, God is. Just think about that for a moment. We say that every Sunday, and we say it kind of rote, and we kind of just go through it. But think about those words. Think about what it means. The prayer is not about changing the storms in our lives, but about how we view the storms in our lives. It's about how we're seeing the things going on around us. Now, at my home church, they've changed it. And if you go to different churches, you'll note that many things change. The divine love through me statement is different in every church that I go to. And the prayer for protection is different in most of them. Peace song is even changed in some of them. But when you see that, they have added an I am statement to it. So when they say it, it says, the light of God surrounds me. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds me. I am the love of God. The power of God protects me. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over me. I am the presence of God. Wherever I am, God is. And then we usually add, and all is well. He didn't. His original prayer didn't have that as part of it, which I find interesting. Things that we add to other people's work is amazing to me. But I think those additions are worth it, to say who we are and who we are in God. So I say to you this morning, when you say that prayer, think about the fact that you're not asking for the light of God to come to you. You're saying, I am the light of God. You already are that light of God. You're not asking for the love of God to seek out love for yourself, but you are the love of God expressing on this earth. You are the power of God that protects. You are love. You are light. You are light. You are power. You are the presence of God. And wherever you are, God is. And so it is.